everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some mistakes to avoid making if you're thinking about going zero waste or if you're in the process of becoming more zero waste or sustainable. Let me know if you've made any of the mistakes I mentioned in the comments down below, or if you've made any mistakes that I don't mention. I'd love to hear about them. So the first one, and maybe the most important, is continuing to be a hyper consumer. So what it means to be a hyper consumer is that you go shopping, you buy things even if you don't need them. You listen to ads and campaigns that tell you you need things for certain things. You don't think critically about what you buy before you buy it. So if you're previously a hyper consumer and then you try to be more zero waste and start just purchasing items because they're sustainable, that's not a very sustainable practice to have. So the first way to combat this is purchasing less items in general. That way you have a smaller impact. Also, purchasing things secondhand is a great option that has less of an impact as well, because the resources that were used to make that item have already been used, and now there's an item just not being used and possibly getting sent to the landfill if it's not purchased. But also, when you go to secondhand stores, it's important to be mindful and think about what you're purchasing instead of just buying anything that fits or buying anything that you think you might use. The way that I do it is I go into a thrift store with a list of things that I'm looking to purchase that I need. I don't need immediately, so I don't have to buy them brand new on hand, but if I come across them in a thrift store, that's something that I know I will use and know that I need at that time. Another thing is people think that going zero waste and living more sustainable is too expensive. But that's looking at it with the hyper-consumer mentality of purchasing. When you start to be more sustainable, you purchase less because the items that you are purchasing are more investment purchases. So you're going to buy something that you can reuse over and over again instead of buying a cheap throwaway item. The second mistake I have on my list is focusing too much on aesthetic. So zero waste has sort of become a trend and has a very specific aesthetic to it, that it's all neutrals and you have to have like very specific matching jars and labels, and everything has to sort of go together. But in reality, that's not what zero waste actually is. Zero waste is pretty ugly. You're going to be reusing jars that have labels that aren't coming off, all kinds of things that mismatch, and things that you buy at the secondhand store that may not match your house, but it's an item that you really need and could really use. So that's what zero waste is. It's avoiding the aesthetic and creating it to be your own. So a big negative in trying to fit an aesthetic is going out and purchasing items just to fit the aesthetic. So it goes against the whole zero waste idea of not purchasing new items and using what you already have in your home. A lot of people are living zero waste just for the trend and for the social media posts, and not living it for the actual lifestyle change that it is. Because zero waste is a lifestyle change, it's not just a style or appearance that is changing. So instead of focusing on the aesthetic, you should follow the rules of zero waste of what to buy, what not to buy, and sort of the lifestyle changes that you may have to make, and purchase items that you may need under those rules. So avoiding single-use items, making investment purchases, and not replacing items that you already have with ones that are more aesthetically pleasing. But I do want to make it clear that it is okay to buy new things for zero waste, as long as they're things that you need and will use. So swaps are great, but make sure that you're swapping a single-use item for something that's reusable. And even better if you can find it at the secondhand store. Another mistake that's often made is decluttering your house. So the whole idea is eco-minimalism and clearing everything out of your house that you already have to replace it with new items or just not have it at all. And then taking those items and donating them to secondhand stores. But this isn't too great because only 10% of the items that get donated actually get resold, and then the rest heads straight for the landfill. The solution to this is not getting rid of things that you might use in the future, giving yourself a time limit to see if maybe you'll use it by then, and if you don't, then seeing if you can maybe give it to a family member or a friend, ensuring it has a new home where it will get used before donating it to a secondhand store. And most importantly, being mindful of your purchases and making sure that you're only buying things that you actually need and not just that you want in the moment, to avoid having to declutter those items that you never used in the first place. Sort of along the same line is not being mindful when you're purchasing items. So a lot of times people that are going more zero waste or sustainable, they'll just purchase something if it says it's sustainable or zero waste without doing the research or making sure that they even need that item. So for example, straws, if you don't use a straw normally before going zero waste, there's no reason to really buy a reusable straw. But if you do use straws, it is a great alternative. Just being mindful that you may not need all of the reusable items or sustainable items that are out on the market these days, but that it's okay to purchase the ones that you'll actually use. Also, along with not being mindful is, like, say for example you are going to the grocery store, you forget your reusable bags and you just keep buying reusable bags. First off, you should make sure that you try to remember your reusable bags, but it is a hard habit to kind of get in the habit of. I like to just keep one in my bag at all times folded up, so I have it just in case, and then I try to keep some in my car as well. But besides remembering the bags, it's also important to consider the resources that are used to make the reusable bags, so everyone that you purchase is taking a certain amount of resources. Another thing that you should be mindful of is sometimes it's better to buy the item that may seem a little bit less zero waste rather than the most zero waste, because sometimes it's more important to buy a item that is fair trade and Leaping Bunny approved. There's other certifications that you should look into, and if say a brand is B Corp certified, just be mindful about where your products came from that you're purchasing. So you may buy a reusable straw, but it could have been made in a factory where the workers are not being treated fairly. Whereas if you bought something that was maybe a little bit less zero waste, it was fair trade and the workers were treated fairly. So one example of this that I noticed is there was a bag of sugar at the grocery store that was in a paper bag. And so immediately I went to buy that one, but then I looked at my options and one of the bags that was in plastic, but it was fair trade certified, and also it had some seals of sustainable farming as well. So I went to purchase that one. So mainly what I'm trying to get at is that you're being mindful and doing the research on the products that you're purchasing before you purchase them. One major mistake is just trying to jump into a zero waste lifestyle without doing any research or planning, and expecting your whole life to change overnight and just immediately be completely zero waste. For me and for many others, it's a process. So you may start reusing the jars that you have in your house and doing things a little bit differently and building up and making certain swaps and becoming more zero waste in certain areas where you're still consuming in others, and just slowly making a transition. That way you don't get overwhelmed by, say, how many things you might have to purchase, so cost-wise, or just how much you have to change and habits you have to adjust. It can be overwhelming if you try to do it all at once. So that's why it's mostly recommended to do it slowly, and as you learn more things and do more research about zero waste or sustainable living, and make the transition a little bit more easy instead of jumping in, getting overwhelmed, and then just giving up on like trying to be zero waste at all. Because really, it's not gonna happen overnight, and that's totally fine. It didn't happen that way for me, and it's not going to happen that way for probably anyone. The last mistake that I have is not thinking that the 3 R's are in order. So we have reduce, reuse, recycle, and that is in order. So first, you're supposed to try to reduce your intake of items and reduce your waste that you're putting out. And then if you have something that is maybe trash to you or something like that, that you reuse it before throwing it away. So if you do take in a plastic carton from something, trying to find a way to reuse it a couple times before having to take it to the recycling or the landfill. And then lastly, recycling is sort of the last resort. So for plastic, of course, it can only be downgraded as it gets recycled. So really, we're trying to avoid consuming plastic in the first place. If we do consume it, we try to reuse it, and then eventually recycling is the last option. With aluminum and other materials, it's a little bit different because those can sort of be recycled more easily and more frequently without downgrading at all. But plastic is a major thing that we're trying to avoid, so recycling is the last option in that sort of cycle. Reducing is the first option because a lot of things can't even be recycled. So certain plastics and films and like receipts per se are not recyclable. So reducing is the main focus, and then reusing and then recycling. Those are some of the mistakes that I've made when I've tried to transition into a more sustainable lifestyle. And of course, it's still ongoing for me. I'm still making changes and still will be for probably a while. And that's okay. It's a continuous motion to a more sustainable lifestyle where you're learning and trying to make changes and form new habits. Like I said, it's not going to happen overnight. These are definitely some mistakes that I have made, and probably some of you have too. And I hope if you're trying to become more zero waste or sustainable, that this video helps you in avoiding some of the mistakes that I've made. And if it has, or if you have any other mistakes that I didn't mention, I'd love to hear about them in the comments down below. Let me know. And if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I come out with new videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and sometimes Saturdays. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye!